Chapter 6. Variety is the spice of life sometimes. No pleasure endures unseasoned by variety. Publilius Serra Sameness is the mother of disgust. Variety, the cure. Francesco Petrarch having 1,000 different ladies is pretty cool, I've learned in my life. I've also found out that having one woman 1,000 different times is more satisfying. Wilt Chamberlain. The secret of happiness is this: let your interests be as wide as possible. Bertrand Russell. The pursuit of variety is one of the fundamental ways human beings forestall existential monotony. But while the variety effect yields many benefits, it is not always the preferred path to take, and more is not always better. Let me give you an example. I love Vietnamese food, and at my favorite Vietnamese restaurant, I almost always get the same dish, beef pho. At my favorite Mexican restaurant in Laguna Beach, California, I almost always get the calamari burrito. When it comes to these two restaurants, I seem to have found a dish that brings me great gustatory satisfaction, and accordingly, I fail to activate my otherwise enthusiastic taste for food variety. I am a bit of a germaphobe, too, but I do not shy away from trying novel and exotic foods, to the point of buying snake soup from a street vendor in Hong Kong. The reality is that both variety and routine have their benefits when it comes to our happiness. At any given point, an individual faces multiple Darwinian poles. The challenge is to know how to navigate the potential minefields into which our instincts guide us. Behavioral scientists have explored many motives and factors that drive human beings to seek variety. A typical argument, especially in consumer psychology, is that introducing novelty into our normal range of choices thwarts the risks of psychological or physiological satiation. Another thing to remember is that the evolutionary reasons that promote variety seeking differ when we are talking about different domains, whether it be food, intellectual stimulation, or sexual activity. So, what are some of the contexts in which variety leads to greater happiness? Using both correlational and experimental studies, we know generally that having a variety of activities and goals is linked to well-being. For example, researchers found that users of the Live Happy app who engaged in a wider variety of happiness-inducing exercises were happier than those who employed a more limited selection. But there has also been a documented negative relationship between pursuing too many presumed positive activities and happiness. As is true of most things in life, the challenge is to find the right balance and understand the right conditions so that the pursuit of variety is beneficial and not detrimental. At times, we may seek the solace of a familiar routine, or as on other occasions, we benefit from an infusion of novelty. Variety seeking is, in part, a personality trait. Some people are inherently greater variety seekers than others, and this might correlate to a wide range of personality traits. Aside from variety seeking as a personality trait, there are situational variables that have a profound effect on the extent to which we seek variety. For instance, researchers have found that we are less likely to seek variety in the morning as compared to later in the day. They propose that this is linked to changes in physiological arousal associated with our diurnal circadian rhythms. We know, too, that it is unwise to go grocery shopping when you are hungry, as you are more likely to buy more of everything. Other situational variables that alter people's desire for variety include hunger, thirst, sleepiness, and the weather. People who are hungry or thirsty exhibit an increased penchant for food variety and drink variety, respectively. Drowsy people seek food variety because it is a form of psychological arousal that helps in wakefulness. When weather worsens our mood, human beings are apt to seek more variety as an arousal-inducing pursuit. The COVID-19 lockdowns also prompted people to seek more variety when they were finally able to travel. The diversity is our strength mantra versus optimal variety. In addition to his job as the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau also acts as Commissar of the Bureau of Diversity, Inclusion and Equity, i.e. where we are all obliged to repeat the party slogan, "Diversity is our strength." No matter the social, political and economic realities and problems around us, inflation is rampant. No worries. Diversity is our strength. Crime is up, easily solvable with more diversity. Islamic terrorism a threat. Canada needs more diversity. Do you suffer from diabetes? Perhaps you need a more diverse collection of doctors who are less interested in body shaming you. Needless to say, the single-minded focus on DIE is wrong-headed on many levels. First, the pursuit of diversity is utterly irrelevant to many issues. For example, a research group's ability to solve a problem in pure mathematics does not depend on the ethnic, racial, or gender identities or sexual orientations of its members. Apparently, if only transgender women of color had tackled Fermat's last theorem, the world would not have needed to wait more than 350 years to have a heterosexual white male, Sir Andrew Wiles, prove it in 1995. Could you imagine how much quicker the double helix structure of DNA could have been identified had we not relied on two white men, Francis Crick and James Watson, to resolve this issue in 1953? Imagine if non-binary Latinx people had not been marginalized by the scientific establishment. The mysteries of DNA could have been elucidated long ago. And do not get me started on the mapping of the human genome. Too much reliance on the scientific method, also known as white science, has clearly held us back. The second problem with the DIE cult is that it focuses on all the wrong metrics of diversity. There are contexts where a greater diversity of political orientations or personality traits is important. In other words, greater variety in some instances does yield optimal performance. It has been demonstrated, for instance, that there is an inverted U-curve on how many highly extroverted individuals there should be in task-performing groups. The concept of diversity as a proxy for variety has clearly become a politically laden term. Progressives love all forms of diversity except when they don't. Intellectually, politically, or culturally. Indeed, they are Talibanic in their desire to cancel, ban, obliterate, and destroy speech, ideas, and statues of which they disapprove. That being said, does one's political orientation affect one's general penchant for variety seeking? The answer is yes, but perhaps not in the way that you might expect. People who scored higher on political conservatism, or who are primed to be in a conservative mindset, were more likely to be engaged in greater food variety seeking. In a quest to explain this otherwise counterintuitive finding, the researchers argued that to the extent that seeking product variety is a social norm in individualistic societies, and conservatives in Western societies are more likely to adhere to individualistic social norms, this might be at the root of the conservative variety-seeking effect. Whereas universities are now bastions of ideological homogeneity, lack of variety, due to the overwhelming number of professors who are left-leaning and progressive in their political bent, and who mostly, if not exclusively, hire like-minded candidates. How well do these institutions fare in promoting intellectual variety seeking? Colleges and universities often tout to parents the importance of a broad, liberal arts education. But does this merely sound good as part of a university's mission statement to parents? Is it otherwise ignored? I turn next to how the pursuit of intellectual variety seeking can lead to cerebral happiness. Intellectual variety seeking versus specialization. Intellectual variety seeking is a fundamental feature of a psychologically rich life. Indeed, a psychologically rich life is one best characterized by a variety of interesting and perspective-changing experiences. When I was pursuing my undergraduate degree, the start of each semester was a uniquely exciting time for me. I would spend the first few weeks sitting in on countless courses prior to deciding on my final choice of electives for that semester. Courses outside of my specialization in mathematics and computer science. It was akin to an all-you-can-eat buffet, albeit the offerings were food for thought and not for your belly. I ended up taking courses in ceramics, the history of French cinema, anthropology, consumer behavior, linguistics, accounting, marketing, economics, and astronomy, among other topics. In other words, I was instantiating the ethos of seeking a broad and well-rounded education even though I was majoring in very technical disciplines. Unlike some of my undergraduate cohorts, who were quantitative jocks, so to speak, my interests span the natural sciences, the social sciences, and the humanities. This has always been the case, as evidenced by the fact that I won the chemistry and history awards when graduating from high school in 1982. As far back as I can remember, I have always been drawn to a very broad range of intellectual interests. Back in 2008, I was invited to the University of Arizona to deliver lectures on 3 separate topics. One of the lectures was titled, "To Strategize or Not to Strategize?" That is the question. Musings of an interdisciplinary and iconoclastic evolutionary consumer scholar. The theme was to explore the pros and cons of 2 distinct research strategies when pursuing an academic career. The first and most accepted approach is to operate within a very narrow academic area of expertise and develop research streams that probe deeply within this tightly defined knowledge base. A key benefit of this in-depth strategy is that it affords academics economies of scale in terms of staying abreast of the relevant academic literature, the appropriate methodologies to use, and the accepted theoretical frameworks. There is no need to constantly revamp one's areas of research expertise if you are a stay-in-your-lane professor. An example of such an academic was the late Alice Eisen, a professor of psychology and marketing at Cornell University during my time there as a doctoral student. Much of her scientific career was spent studying the relationship between positive affect and various phenomena, such as word association, memory tasks, intertemporal choice, creativity, and variety seeking. The second, and less accepted strategy, is to pursue broad research interests, unencumbered by topical constraints, disciplinary boundaries, or methodological confines. My scientific career has been defined by this second, broader approach. I have published papers in medicine, psychology, consumer behavior, economics, politics, advertising, marketing, evolutionary theory, and bibliometrics, to name some of the intellectual disciplines on an extraordinarily wide range of topics within them. The driving reason for doing so stems from my need for intellectual variety seeking. I am unwilling to remain within a tightly defined intellectual landscape. Rather, I view my role as a professor as one where I seek to advance knowledge whilst being an intellectual hedonist. Life is simply too short to be a one-trick pony. In 2016, I was invited to speak at the psychology department of a Californian university. More than a speaking engagement, it was a second attempt by that university to hire me. In 2011, the president and chancellor at the time wanted me to become a professor at their institution. The deal was nearly done when, in all likelihood, progressive faculty members protested and succeeded in blocking my appointment. Albeit, I was told that it was due to budgetary constraints. The full story is an extraordinary tale of academic cowardice and institutional rot, but I will leave the details for another time and place. For my 2016 visit, I prepared a lecture covering several of my published and ongoing projects, most of which shared the application of evolutionary theory to a broad variety of phenomena, including the behavioral genetics of decision-making, the effects of conspicuous consumption on men's testosterone levels, the effects of the menstrual cycle on women's beautification choices, the universal hourglass figure as advertised by online female escorts, the different ways men and women approach mate selection, and the genetic factors that affect gift-giving at Israeli weddings. My point was to highlight precisely how evolutionary theory allows me to bring theoretical coherence under a unifying framework to many subjects. I assumed that my wide-ranging talk, a form of intellectual variety seeking, would entertain and instruct. Boy, was I wrong. The feedback that I received was that my work was too scattered and unfocused. I should have instead presented a set of studies in a very narrow research area. For me, this would be a quick cure for insomnia. Hyper-specialization is the hill where big ideas and disruptive innovations. I will accept, however, that a hyper-generalist might be insufficiently well-versed to make a significant contribution in a particular field. Think of the adage, "Jack of all trades, master of none." As in most things in life, the optimal point lies between these two extremes. In an otherwise bleak landscape of DIE insanity, today's universities at least recognize that many of the most pressing scientific and practical problems that involve academic research require an interdisciplinary approach. Needless to say, interdisciplinarity requires a mindset rooted in intellectual variety seeking. Take, for example, the mapping of the human genome. It utilized knowledge from a broad range of disciplines, including biology, chemistry, physics, bioinformatics, genetics, mathematics, and computer science. 25 years ago, Modi Nisani, an interdisciplinary professor, provided a list of 10 reasons to explain the importance of interdisciplinarity, including 5. Many intellectual, social, and practical problems require interdisciplinary approaches. 6. Interdisciplinary knowledge and research serve to remind us of the unity of knowledge ideal. 7. Interdisciplinarians enjoy greater flexibility in their research. 8. More so than narrow disciplinarians, interdisciplinarians often treat themselves to the intellectual equivalent of traveling in new lands. Reason 5 speaks to the importance of interdisciplinarity to cracking problems that no single area of expertise can. Reason 6 is a recognition of the importance of consilience as espoused by the late Harvard biologist E.O. Wilson. Reason 7 acknowledges that a penchant for intellectual variety seeking engenders cognitive flexibility, whereas Reason 8 is in line with my view that life is too short to refrain from visiting a broad range of intellectual landscapes. Cerebral variety seeking, as instantiated via an ethos of interdisciplinarity, yields the good life by helping us address important societal and scientific challenges. An analysis of papers published in 2000 across a very broad range of disciplines revealed that the top 1% of most cited papers also happen to be more interdisciplinary than all other papers. Not surprisingly, interdisciplinarity yields scientific works that have more impact on society. Of note, two measures of interdisciplinarity, the diversity and variety of cited references, have a positive effect on being cited by other scholars in the long term, but not so over the short term. Most universities proclaim that the pursuit of interdisciplinarity is one of their central missions. And yet, when it comes to actually supporting such endeavors, they quickly revert to disciplinary tribalism. Case in point, back in 2009, I had hosted the eminent evolutionary biologist David Sloan Wilson at Concordia University. David pioneered the Evolutionary Studies program at Binghamton University, where students are now able to obtain an interdisciplinary minor in evolutionary studies. I tried to establish a similar program at my university, but when I pitched the idea to the various deans, I received less than enthusiastic responses. The program would have been an important first for a Canadian university, but bureaucratic inertia, lack of vision, and disciplinary tribalism killed it. Professors are ultimately human beings, and, as such, they exhibit the standard traps of the us versus them mindset. The reality is that academics are trained to think within disciplinary and functional silos. It is no surprise that I hardly interact with my business school colleagues in other disciplines. We may share a building, but we seldom collaborate with one another. Ultimately, the ethos of interdisciplinarity will only be fully instantiated when universities create reward structures that explicitly encourage intellectual variety seeking. In the meantime, however, there is no reason why you, the listener, should not seek variety in your own intellectual pursuits, such as in your book choices for a quiet evening at home, as long as your home includes a copy of this book and The Parasitic Mind, Analogical Reasoning, Generalists, and Polymaths. In my public engagement, I often use analogical reasoning to demonstrate the fallacy of a given position. The power of analogies comes from our human desire to compare and contrast experiences and data. Or to put it in the context of this chapter, analogies apply intellectual variety seeking and interdisciplinary interests to the common sense application of logic. Some of the great scientific insights in human history were arrived at via analogical reasoning. Perhaps none as famously as Johannes Kepler's use of extensive analogies in developing his cosmological work on planetary motion. We know this because Kepler kept a detailed account of his cognitive processes of reasoning and discovery. Kepler's cognitive detailing would be referred to in today's parlance as concurrent verbal protocols, verbalizing what a decision maker is doing as he engages a task, or retrospective verbal protocols, verbalizing what a decision maker did after having completed a task. Verbal protocols are very laborious to analyze because they generate hugely detailed transcripts, but they are incredibly rich in terms of the cognitive details that are being described. In any case, the ability to generate incisive and illuminating analogies often requires that one be well versed across intellectual domains. This is precisely what the psychologist Kevin Dunbar sought to establish with his research on the inner workings of molecular biology labs. Specifically, Dunbar highlighted how scientists use analogical reasoning and showed that labs with members coming from a greater variety of disciplines yielded greater analogical reasoning. The bottom line is that to be an intellectual variety seeker enriches one's life on a personal level and enhances scientists' ability to come up with breakthrough discoveries. An analysis of U.S. patents, a measure of innovation, filed between 1975 and 1999 in the electronics industry, found that in technological environments defined by high uncertainty, having a generalist on the team yielded positive effects in terms of the economic relevance of the patent. Interestingly, in slow-paced scientific domains, generalists fare better than specialists. Generalists and specialists assess information differently, and an examination of patents filed by 3M inventors revealed that both are needed. In terms of the raw number of filed patents, generalists performed better, but, not surprisingly, sophisticated technical inventions came from specialists. The ability to harness the creative power of a variety of people with radically different backgrounds to solve problems that otherwise have stymied specialists is at the root of Innocentive, where people get together to solve the world's greatest challenges. The company has proclaimed an 80% success rate in generating crowdsourced solutions. On a related note, the Aerosmith Bibliometric Project, founded by Don R. Swanson, is a systematized platform that uses algorithmic formulas to identify links in scientific research papers that are otherwise in disconnected disciplines. Many important discoveries have been made by identifying links between otherwise disparate scholarly endeavors. Highly accomplished academics often exhibit broad interests outside of their areas of expertise. The late Nobel laureate physicist Richard Feynman was an ardent bongo drummer. The economist Thomas Sowell, one of the original slayers of woke ideas, has been an avid photographer for many decades. The classicist Victor Davis Hanson has been a farmer for many years. A study that contrasted 5 groups, namely Nobel laureates in the sciences, National Academy of Sciences, NAS members, British Royal Society, BRS members, Sigma Xi members, scientists in general, and the general public, found that Nobel Prize winners were the most likely to have arts and crafts avocations, followed by the 2 other groupings of eminent scientists, NAS and BRS, which had roughly equal avocations, and coming in last were Sigma Xi members and the general public, who had roughly the same number of avocations. Hence, the more eminent a scientist is, the more likely he is to exhibit broad interests outside his area of scientific expertise. On a related note, an analysis of the academic background of Nobel Prize winners in medicine or physiology found that many had a multidisciplinary education as part of their academic training. A mind trained in intellectual variety can unlock important scientific mysteries. Back in 2014, I wrote a Psychology Today column listing the 10 historical figures I would invite to a party, and I asked people on social media to offer their own lists. The 2 most popular responses were Albert Einstein and Charles Darwin. Here are mine, in no particular order: Charles Darwin, Albert Einstein, Isaac Newton, Galileo Galilei, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Leonardo da Vinci, Maimonides, and King Solomon. If I had to put one guest above the others, it would be da Vinci, because he was the ultimate Renaissance man. A polymath extraordinaire, interested in anatomy, botany, and cartography, who made astounding contributions as a painter, engineer, scientist, sculptor. Some of his sketches were prophetic of future inventions, like the machine gun and the helicopter. A copy of Da Vinci's famous drawing, The Vitruvian Man, hangs in our bedroom in honor of this great man's intellectual and artistic achievements. While it is increasingly rare in today's academic ecosystem to be a polymath, the benefits are incontestable. As Michael Araki, a researcher in the fields of innovation and entrepreneurship, has stated, polymathic breadth, rather than detrimental to rigorous inquiry, provides the resources necessary for critical thinking and sheds light on previously unseen gaps in our understanding. It helps us identify common foundations among disciplines, offering solid grounds for future inquiry. It fosters development of rich collections of ideas, experiences, and skills that enable novel and surprising combinations, which can lead to powerful, otherwise unreachable insights. Unsurprisingly, humanity's most celebrated discoveries came from people who engaged with a variety of interests and integrated them into synergistic networks of enterprise. Clearly, whenever critical thinking or innovation are necessary, it pays to encourage the development of the rich, examined, and integrated polymathy. When I established my show, The Sad Truth, in 2014, my objective was to hold conversations with interesting people, irrespective of their professions or areas of specialization. Unlike many podcasts that focus on a singular theme, whether it be crime, psychology, fitness, or happiness, I could not bear to restrict myself in this manner. I'm an intellectual variety seeker. As in most other pursuits in my life, my show would be defined by the broad variety of my guests. I've held chats with psychologists, physicians, philosophers, physicists, chemists, biologists, primatologists, anthropologists, economists, political scientists, historians, a bioethicist, a geneticist, a sociologist, a geophysicist, a statistician, porn stars, media personalities, athletes, literature professors, politicians, an ex-Islamic extremist, an imam, the founder of Twitter, a legendary soul singer, a cartoonist, a satirist, journalists, lawyers, a wrongly jailed prisoner who spent 29 years in prison for a murder that he did not commit, activists, a film director, actors, comedians, and the Navy SEAL who killed Osama bin Laden, and the niece of Osama bin Laden. It is not easy to carry on meaningful and engaging conversations with such a varied guest list. It requires intellectual curiosity, epistemic humility, and open-mindedness, all of which are ultimately linked to a desire to sample from a heterogeneous intellectual buffet. I am infinitely richer for having met these brilliant people and engaged them in long-form conversations. Thank you. Engaging your mind in a variety of intellectual tasks is absolutely necessary for living the good life. As Socrates reputedly said, the unexamined life is not worth living. He and his greatest pupils showed an interest in everything. This made them fully human. It did not necessarily make them happy. There is a distinction between the good life and being happy. But for many of us, exercising our reason across broad fields of endeavor and finding links between those fields certainly helps us find happiness. Sexual variety question. Are humans happiest when they seek sexual variety, or when they accept monogamous bonds of marriage? As an evolutionary scientist, my first step to answering this question is to examine mating systems across the animal kingdom. Sexually reproducing species organize their mating systems in several ways. One way is polygyny, as practiced by mountain gorillas and elephant seals, where one male maintains a harem of multiple females. There is also polyandry, practiced by cassowaries and jacanas, where one female has multiple male mates. And there is monogamy, notably practiced by prairie voles and sandhill cranes, where one male mates with one female. Depending on the mating system, sex differences are either exaggerated or eliminated. For example, in polygynous species, the sexual dimorphism is sizable, as evidenced by the size differential between a male elephant seal and its female counterpart. In the human context, men are roughly 15% larger than women. Where do humans fall when it comes to this particular taxonomy? Are we naturally monogamous, or do we seek sexual variety? The truth is that we seek both, to have the cake and eat it too, meaning that we have a desire for long-term pair bonding, as well as an instinct to stray from our monogamous unions. The quest for forging monogamous relationships is rooted in the evolutionary recognition that human babies require tremendous investment from both parents. We are a biparental species, which is a rarity among mammals. From the research that has been conducted on mammals, birds, and fish, we know that 90% of mammalian species have female-only parental care. 10% have biparental care. None have male-only parental care. 90% of bird species are biparental. 8% have female-only parental care, and 2% have male-only parental care. Most fish species offer no parental care, but of those that do, 50% are male-only, 30% are female-only, and 20% are biparental. What is often forgotten, given the dominance of Western culture, is that monogamy is not a given for human beings. Anthropological records suggest that historically, 85% of cultures have permitted polygynous marriages. Parts of the African and Islamic world still do, while monogamy is the marital system of nearly all of the remaining 15% of cultures. There are very few cases of human polyandry, the most famous of which might be Tibetan fraternal polyandry, which can, in rare circumstances, make evolutionary sense. Men and women, thus, face an existential sexual conundrum. We have evolved a desire for sexual variety in order to augment our mating success, concomitant with a desire to form monogamous long-term unions in order to raise children. The wedding jitters, or proverbial wedding day cold feet, that many people experience as they are about to get married, likely stem from two questions. 1. Am I marrying the right person? 2. Even if this is the right person, am I willing and able to remain sexually faithful to one person for the rest of my life? Hence, one's wedding day is both a cause for great celebration, I found my soulmate, and deep mourning, the death of sexual variety, as I'm denying all future sexual opportunities. Variety seeking is nature's Viagra pill, and it has been documented across many species that sexual variety increases sexual interest. It has been given the term, the Coolidge effect, because of an anecdote from when United States President Calvin Coolidge and his wife were visiting a farm. Mrs. Coolidge, strolling separately from her husband, was told that a certain rooster mated multiple times a day. She was impressed, and told the farm worker to tell her husband. When President Coolidge was informed, he asked whether the rooster was mating with the same hen. He was told no, the rooster mated with multiple hens. President Coolidge supposedly quipped, "Tell that to Mrs. Coolidge." The Coolidge effect has been documented within the human context. This penchant has been commercialized by Ashley Madison, a company that specializes in organizing sexual dalliances outside of marriage, with such slogans as, "When monogamy becomes monotony," and "Life is short, have an affair." Evolutionary psychology and other scientific research has shown that it is an incontestable fact that men desire sexual variety more than women do. This finding has been demonstrated in nations around the globe. That notwithstanding, it is unequivocally true that women too have evolved a desire for sexual variety. Women are more likely to cheat when they are maximally fertile, are more likely to do so with males of superior genetic stock, as compared to the cuckolded partners, are more likely to orgasm when they cheat, and are less likely to insist on using contraception. Taken together, this is known as the shopping for good genes mating strategy. A woman might marry Bill Gates for security, but cheat on him with the brawny, sexy gardener. Furthermore, as described by the evolutionary biologist Robin Baker in his 1996 book, Sperm Wars, men's ejaculate contains 3 phenotypes of spermatozoa. The classic swimmers that look to fertilize a woman's ovum, the blockers that stand at the entrance of a woman's reproductive tract to block entry of another man's sperm, and the killers that seek to kill other men's sperm. Given that sperm is viable for roughly 72 hours inside a woman's reproductive tract, the fact that men have evolved such chemical weaponry to thwart other men's sperm implies that, evolutionarily speaking, it was highly likely that your female ancestors and mine had sex with at least 2 men within a 3-day period. Finally, a comparison of the size of testes as a function of body size across primates is quite revealing regarding female promiscuity within a given species. For example, gorillas have a polygynous mating arrangement wherein a singular dominant male monopolizes sexual access to many females, although extra pair copulations can occur. Hence, since the likelihood of sperm wars is minimal, male gorillas have relatively small testes. Male chimpanzees, on the other hand, are walking testicles. They have gigantic testes, precisely because of intense female promiscuity. Would you like to venture where human males fit on that continuum? Are we closer to gorillas or chimpanzees? Gentlemen, please brace yourselves. Human males tend to have relatively larger testicles than gorillas, but smaller than chimpanzees, suggesting that, evolutionarily speaking, human females are likely to seek sexual variety. Variety is a two-edged sword. What is good for the goose is good for the gander. Since we have evolved both the desire to form long-term unions and a desire to seek sexual variety, how do these conflicting goals relate to happiness? Are those with fewer lifetime sexual partners happier than those with more? Does the single life or the married life lead to greater individual happiness? The data are quite messy, but it does seem that marriage improves one's well-being and that those with very few sexual partners prior to marriage are happiest. That said, long-term couples who maintain a high level of sexual satisfaction with each other benefit from incorporating sexual variety within their relationships. Note, an examination of sexual frequency of American adults for a 25-year period, 1989 through 2014, revealed that married people have sex more often than unmarried people. Is it better to have sex 80 times per year with one spouse, no variety, or 20 times per year, one each with a different partner, high variety? I suppose that the answer to this question will depend on a slew of personality traits, but perhaps most notably, on one score on the sociosexual orientation inventory, a measure of a person's desire for emotionally unfettered, and hence, non-committal, sexual contacts. A quick final note about women's drive for sexual variety. Whereas it is clear that women seek greater sexual variety when they are maximally fertile, this penchant is contingent on their perceived vulnerability to disease. In other words, women's desire for sexual variety increases as a genetic insurance policy against increased disease threats. And women who are in the maximally fertile part of their ovulating cycles not only desire sexual variety, they desire a greater variety of consumer goods and hedonic foods. The life lesson here is that if you are an ovulating woman, don't go shopping on the internet, and avoid the all-you-can-eat buffet food variety. I am currently at my lightest weight since 1996. I have been able to achieve a dramatic weight loss in part because I have managed to redirect the variety effect within the food domain to my advantage. From an evolutionary perspective, it makes perfect sense to seek a multitude of varied food sources. After all, we are omnivores who crave a broad range of tastes, smells, and textures in our food offerings. It is perhaps not surprising, then, that the Mediterranean diet, which is defined by a heterogeneous set of food sources, is optimal for one's health, including for maintaining a healthy weight. The key, of course, is moderation in quantity while enjoying the diversity of offerings. I should add here, as a side note, that I am a huge animal lover, and I abhor the grotesque and diabolical cruelty that is endemic within the animal farming industry. As such, I am fully committed to a radical improvement in how we treat our sentient animal cousins. But humans have evolved a desire to consume animal protein, and they are not going to lose that desire. As such, it is wrong, and likely suboptimal to our well-being, to expect us all to become strict vegans. That is simply a fact, for which there is anatomical, physiological, morphological, cranial, and dental, paleobiological, parasitological, archaeological, cross-cultural, anthropological, nutritional, genomic, genetical, medical, sexual, and psychological data to support my argument. But of all the many groups that come after me for stating plain evolutionary science, the three worst and most unreasonable are militant feminists, who dislike what evolution says about sex, the pronoun Taliban, whose entire ideology denies science, and the tofu brigade, who cannot accept that humans are omnivores. No amount of scientific evidence will ever make the tofu brigade happy. To them, I am a moral hypocrite, because I often post photos attesting to my love of animals, along with photos attesting to my love of food, including food that involves animal protein. Voila! Therein lies the proof that I am a morally inconsistent, degenerate Nazi who tortures puppies and kittens as a leisure activity. Nuanced thinking is never a strong suit of those parasitized by black or white ideologies. I shall return to food variety shortly, but for the sake of completeness, let me briefly mention my most harrowing ordeal with the immeasurably unhappy and angry pronoun Taliban. It is only slightly hyperbolic to argue that ISIS militia are somewhat less scary than the pronoun Taliban. Once they descend on you, it is best that you find a panic room or storm shelter in which to hide and weather their ire. I had posted a profoundly innocuous tweet, recounting my wife's perplexity about how to address a barista who appeared to be a transgender individual. The tweet was meant to highlight my wife's sensitivity and kindness. Here is the full thread. My wife walked up to the server at our local cafe. The person was possibly transgender. She wanted to engage the individual but was frozen in fear that she might use a pronoun that might offend. Therein lies the problem with this language policing. It takes perfectly natural social situations, and in the quest to not offend an extraordinarily small minority, who of course deserve to live fully dignified lives like anyone else, everyone is walking on eggshells. Fighting for a world free of bigotry does not imply that we must suppress perfectly natural categorization mechanisms that are built into our brains and our languages. I can be free of bigotry without being compelled to celebrate your unique personhood. The intellectual luminary and child actress Valerie Bertinelli weighed in as follows. Hi, pardon me, how are you this morning? May I please have, thank you, language you can use without worrying about someone's pronouns. But you don't really care about that, do you? You're just looking for targets. Then you can cry victim when people come to their defense. To which I replied, she wanted to say to the server's colleague, he'll get the hang of it. New server, but hesitated because of heel. Dial back the outrage. Read my tweet carefully. The interaction was otherwise very warm. Cheers. Why do I share this exchange? Because it highlights many such exchanges that I have had with a variety of Twitter users. Those who act as the pronoun Taliban, as well as the tofu brigade, the militant feminists, and many progressives, live their lives in a very agitated, unhappy, self-righteous, and perpetually offended state. Here is an important life lesson. Never be as ideologically angry as the tofu brigade or the pronoun Taliban or the militant feminists. And avoid becoming a blue-checked, blue-haired, woke keyboard warrior. It is a pathway to venomous misery. Instead, pursue the reason calm that leads to happiness. Returning to food variety. Over the past 2 decades, my wife and I have gone to numerous all-inclusive vacation destinations, including several Club Med villages, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Turks and Caicos twice, San Salvador, Bahamas, and Sandals in Nassau, Bahamas. A key reason to go to any of these locations is, of course, to frolic on the beautiful beaches. But perhaps the main driver of any such vacation is best described by the Italian saying, La carne is debole. The flesh is weak. It is terribly alluring to know that you have unlimited access to delicious food buffets and innumerable drinks, albeit we are not avid drinkers. The gustatory pull is very strong, as per the anecdotal evidence that guests will typically return home having put on 5 pounds for each week spent at one of those all-inclusive waste destroyers. It makes perfect evolutionary sense that we are attracted by food variety seeking. A recent meta-analysis has confirmed that food variety increases our food intake. And of course, greater food intake will, all other things being equal, result in weight gain. The variety effect, though, is more nuanced. Using a variety of varieties model, researchers explained the conditions under which having greater food variety might actually yield weight loss. Whereas food variety within a given sitting might cause weight gain, a variety of food offerings using a longer time period might result in weight loss. Hence, one cannot simply say that under all conditions, more variety implies weight gain. It depends on the type of variety that is being measured. Interestingly, greater variety of a given stimulus, For example, dots of one color versus dots of many colors leads to reduced quantity estimates. When people are shown a bowl of M&M's candies consisting of one color and then asked to pour M&M's candies into a second bowl to equal the quantity found in the original bowl, they pour larger quantities when the bag that they are given is comprised of multicolored candies. Hence, this perceptual bias coupled with our penchant for variety seeking makes the all-you-can-eat buffet a severe impediment to our well-being and waistlines. Note, though, that a greater variety of food colors on your plate is indicative of healthiness. Imagine a plate consisting of 5 colors versus one consisting solely of yellow-brown tones. The former, likely, consists of several colorful fruits and vegetables, whereas the latter is likely a mishmash of fried foods. The key takeaway is that there is no universal variety rule. At times, more variety benefits us. On other occasions, it is detrimental to our well-being. Variety of activities and geographic locations. At my home, we have 3 cardio machines, an elliptical, a stationary bike, and a treadmill. Does the fact that we have 3 machines increase the amount of exercise that I do as compared to if we had only, say, 1 machine? Anecdotally, I would answer with an emphatic yes. In the same way that a food buffet induces greater eating, a buffet of exercise machines yields greater exercising. I often will do a home biathlon, using 2 of the machines in one session, and more rarely, a home triathlon, all 3 machines in one session. This has certainly augmented the amount of time that I dedicate to my daily exercise routine. The science supports my anecdotal evidence. Incorporating a variety of exercise machines yields many benefits, including a greater number of completed repetitions, more cumulative weight lifted on resistance machines, as well as greater liking of the exercise sessions. The variety effect can make us fatter, greater food intake, but it can also make us thinner, greater amount of exercising. Of course, variety can also be challenging. At the beginning of my career as a professor, I was irked by the imposition of mundane errands that interrupted the flow of my work as an academic. If I was preparing lectures, I did not want to be bothered with anything else, and I was dedicated to completing one task before moving on to another. As my career progressed, I had to learn quickly how to multitask, as my professional life took on a very hectic turn. I was soon juggling many assignments, from working on scientific papers to writing articles for a lay audience, or books, teaching, supervising theses, applying for research grants, fielding media requests, hosting The Sad Truth Online, answering fan emails, being a dad and a husband, and numerous other responsibilities and activities. Does such a variety of activities lead to happiness? It turns out that it depends on a given time frame. Within a relatively short time frame, like an hour, greater variety leads to lesser happiness because it is usually regarded as a hindrance to productivity. But in longer time periods, say, over the course of a day, variety augments one's happiness because the variety of activities is more likely to be regarded as stimulating. In today's era of social media interruptions, this finding resonates deeply with me. When I was working on my earlier books, prior to the era of hyperactive social media engagement, I never experienced a break of my writing flow stemming from this lure. Today, on the other hand, I detest the fact that I often experience the irresistible pull of scrolling through my Twitter feed. Twitter interruptions over a 1-hour period are annoying, whereas tweeting during a dedicated 30-minute block can be rewarding. Speaking of time management, using data from 4 countries, Canada, the United States, the Netherlands, and Denmark, researchers found that when individuals purchase time-saving products or services, their happiness increases. In a world of endless time pressures, freeing up one's time is a pathway to well-being. I know of this firsthand, as it has become unbearably stressful to handle many of the logistical details of my daily life, such as booking guests on my show, arranging travel itineraries, and fielding the endless emails that I receive. Hiring a personal assistant would certainly add to my overall sense of well-being. As I have previously explained, my wife and I frequently take 1-hour morning walks. Is it best to repeat the same route, or do we benefit from incorporating a variety of settings? A recent study addressed this issue and found that individuals who experienced a diversity of locations experienced positive effects that could be seen in brain image studies, including greater connectivity between the hippocampus and striatum regions of the brain. It is clear that humans are creatures of habit, and as such, we feel comfortable engaging in routinized behavior. However, the interjection of variety, in this case via an exploration of a heterogeneity of neighborhoods and environments, can serve as an elixir against the dangers of perceptual monotony.